Now, Opposition Leader Bill Shorten's reputation was in the spotlight this week with his appearance at the Royal Commission into Trade Unions. The Commissioner, Dyson Heydon, questioned Mr Shorten's credibility as a witness, and sub-Liberal MPs accused the Opposition Leader of a conflict of interest during his time at the Australian Workers' Union.
Well, for more on this and the other top stories of the week, we're joined in Canberra by John Roskam, Executive Director of the Institute of Public Affairs, and in Sydney by John Kaye, New South Wales Greens member of the Legislative Council. Good morning to you both.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Now, we have two Johns, so we'll try not to get too confusing this morning. But John Kaye, if I can just begin with you, Bill Shorten in the spotlight. We've even had Laurie Oakes this morning writing an opinion piece in the Telegraph saying it looks like it's time to go. Pressure is mounting. Where do you see this taking us?
Look, there's no question that what the AWU did under Bill Shorten's leadership was appalling. The very best spin you can put on it is that they put themselves in a position where they could be accused of a conflict of interest, of selling out their members to receive money into the union. The worst spin you can put on it is that they actually did have a conflict of interest. The problem I have with all of this is it comes out of a Royal Commission that is deeply motivated by politics and by ideology, rather than by helping the union movement face the undoubted challenges that it has to confront over the next 20 years. There are unions that do a fabulous job of making sure their membership know what's going on in negotiations. I've belonged to a number of unions that are really brilliant at giving their members line of sight over the kind of negotiations and the deals are being cut, and there are others that don't do such a good job. We want to resolve that problem, the fundamental problem here, which is much bigger than whether Bill Shorten survives as leader of the opposition or not. Then we need a better vehicle than an ideologically motivated Royal Commission that's really there to help Tony Abbott win the next election.
John Roskam, your take on that? I guess 2 points. First of all, allegations perhaps certainly from Labor that this is some sort of show trial, and secondly, the fate of Bill Shorten.
Oh, look, the Royal Commission is absolutely necessary. We've seen allegations of criminal behaviour, we've seen allegations of illegality, and the tragedy is the state police forces haven't done anything about it, ASIC hasn't done anything about it, the regulators, the ACCC hasn't done anything about it. I think it's difficult but necessary that we need a Royal Commission, unfortunately, to examine these things. Look, the question of conflict of interest is absolutely central, and John's right, but it goes to the question of why do employers feel the need to have to pay money to moderate unions to keep out more extreme unions from their businesses? For me, this is the problem of the Royal Commission, and this is the challenge for the Labor Party. But whether Bill Shorten stays as leader or not is something for the Labor Party to decide, and he has to mount the argument that his deal got workers better conditions and got workers to keep their jobs.
But John Roskam, do you believe that this actually reflects poorly on Bill Shorten? We've had criticisms of him as well from the person leading the inquiry, Dyson Heydon, who has questioned whether or not his responses, I mean, that's pretty damning criticism.
Oh, look, it is damning, and Bill Shorten has to answer the questions, but the real issue for the union movement is it better to have a worker in a job employed at perhaps conditions less or different from the award than to not have them in a job at all? And that's the central question for the Labor Party, and that's what Bill Shorten's going to have to argue about if he is going to keep his job in the coming months.
But John, look, I agree with you. There are always questions like that, but those questions should be resolved democratically within the union, not by a deal between an employer and the union and the union executive. The only positive thing, in my opinion, that comes out of this Royal Commission is a question about how do we go forward for the union movement in Australia. There's no doubt it's facing severe challenges. What concerns me is we're getting caught up with, what did Bill Shorten do or what did Bill Shorten not do. We're getting caught up in an attack on the concept of the union movement, on the union movement itself, and on the Labor Party, when we should be talking about the more detailed problems. As far as Bill Shorten's leadership of the Labor Party is concerned, I find it problematic to understand how a man who's behaved like that could continue to be the leader of the Labor Party. As I said, I've been a member of a union for many years. I've had the deepest respect for the people who have led a number of those unions and the way they've behaved. I would have no respect for a person who cut a deal behind my back. If there was a deal that needed to be made, fine, let's talk about that deal publicly and openly. Let's talk about who benefits from it, but not behind closed doors.
Oh, look, John, and I'd agree with you. That's the challenge. No, but ultimately it's the union membership who must decide on the union leadership at elections. I don't think this is a Royal Commission into the nature of unions as such, or the right of people to join or not join a union. For me, the question is, where would the CFMEU in this? Why does an employer need to pay a so-called moderate union keep out an extreme union, and why does the system allow that and perhaps encourage that? And then, as you say, what did Bill Shorten tell or not tell his members about any side deals?
All right, let's just move to another issue that's perhaps plaguing the other side of politics, the coalition, in particular the issue of mining, land use in rural areas, and Barnaby Joyce has commented on this, that his concern obviously for farmers and the use of their land for, be it coal seam gas or just broader open cut mining. John Kaye, how do you see this issue being resolved? Because there's been some strange bedfellows here, as far as perhaps even the Green movement and farmers being on the one side.
Yeah, it's always ironic in these situations where it's the Green Party that is the only party that doesn't have its hands caught in deals with miners, and which really is standing alongside farmers who tend not to vote for us. But that's a side issue. The real issue, from my perspective, is how is it that almost every politician, from the Premier of New South Wales, Mike Baird, through to the through to the Federal Agriculture Minister, Barnaby Joyce, says, "Oh no, we don't want this mine. We don't want this mine." But then the mine goes ahead. The Shenhua Watermark mine, the largest mine in New South Wales, goes ahead. Each level of government and each political party has had plenty of opportunities to stop this mine, but none has. All of them have publicly said, oh, how bad it is, then said, oh, look, there's this independent process, we can't get in the way of it, when indeed they had mechanisms for stopping the mine. How this plays out in the long term is it's now bounced back to the New South Wales government. They have the final say. They, of course, we've spoken about conflicts of interest before. They have up to $1 billion, or supposedly about $1 billion in royalties over the life of this mine. On the one hand, on the other hand, some of the state's most productive agricultural land, it's 40% more productive than the average land in New South Wales, is at risk. It's serious risk. Loses its water, it goes for good. It's no longer of any value to us.
John Roskam, are we sacrificing important agricultural land and water underground for the sake of big bucks?
Well, remember, the big bucks go to fund hospitals. The big bucks go to fund schools. I'm not sure that I'll agree with John on this point. Farming and mining can coexist, as it has for hundreds of years in Australia. Where the mine is proposed to be is not prime farmland. The federal government has imposed the tightest restrictions of any mine ever on this proposal. If there is going to be any disruption to the water table, operations are going to stop, development is going to stop. You can have both. And I'm very sceptical about this idea that, well, the government is only doing it for a potential $1 billion of royalties. Absolutely they are, because we need those services. You can have mining and farming coexisting.
Okay, so a couple of points there, John. Firstly, your vision of mining, you say mining and farming have coexisted for 100 years, and you're possibly right, but they weren't mines that were bigger than the Sydney CBD or the Melbourne CBD. They weren't mines that would lower the water table and potentially poison the Murray-Darling Basin water table. They weren't mines that were so big they could be seen from space. We're talking about a whole new a whole new industrial kind of mining that we haven't seen before and that weren't there for the last 100 years. Secondly, yes, you're right, it's up on the hills, it's not down in the Breezer Plain, but it will still damage the water table. The real issue, the huge issue that is agitating farmers across the Liverpool Plains and in fact across Australia is what is going to happen to their water supply. They critically depend on groundwater, the water that's actually under the ground. If you start lowering that table or poisoning that table or increasing the salinity of that water table, it's the end of the productivity of those mines. You say they've got the strongest conditions in place. Well, Greg Hunt, the Environment Minister, says, look, terrific, we've got these conditions in place where if anything happens to that water table, we'll stop the mining going ahead. Well, that's fine, except by then it's too late. We can't mess about with water on the driest continent on the planet. Thirdly, as far as the money is concerned, there are plenty of ways for the New South Wales government to make lots of money, particularly from renewable energy and from creating the renewable energy boom that's just around the corner, without going down the route of effectively selling off the future, destroying the future to grab a handful of bucks. And finally, as you well know, John, the price of coal is going south rapidly, not just thermal coal, but also metallurgical coal. That $1 billion is unlikely to ever be seen.
All right, just I know you two won't agree on that issue. Let's just
Maybe not.
let's just move finally to the issue around Q&A and that ongoing debate. John Roskam, calls for the program to be brought under the news umbrella at the ABC. What did you make this week of Tony Abbott's call, essentially banning his frontbench ministers from appearing on the show? Was that the right move?
Oh, yes, I think it was in the short term. Look, I've been on Q&A. I've enjoyed the program. It's a good program, but from my perspective, it is biased. It does have a particular political lean to it. I think the Prime Minister was right to call for a change because of the events that happened a few weeks ago. If this was the way to get change, then I think it was appropriate. It is not incumbent upon any minister or opposition shadow minister to go on a program where they don't get a fair go. And I believe that often Conservatives don't get a fair go on the Q&A program, and if this results in better editorial standards, more rigorous standards, that's a good outcome. And for me also, it raises the broader question of what is the role of a government broadcaster. For me, the government funding a TV station is no more offensive than the government funding a newspaper. So, an important debate.
I have a problem with the expression government broadcaster. The ABC is not a government broadcaster. Pravda in the Soviet Union was a government broadcaster. It's a public broadcaster that's funded by the government, but it should be independent. I find it very hard, the episodes of Q&A I've watched, I find it very hard to say that it had any degree of bias whatsoever, given that the Conservative commentators, a number of people like Janet Elbrickson who are on there, who were given what I think is more than a fair go, given, and yourself, John Roskam, but also given given the number of government ministers who are given a fair go. Look, media bias is a great creature. Whoever's in government, media bias always works against it. I remember Paul Keating being furious with the ABC. I remember Gough Whitlam being furious with the ABC. You know, if a Prime Minister is angry with the ABC is doing its job. What I think is wrong is using the threat of a boycott to try and undermine a particular political program.
John Kaye, John Roskam, thanks very much.
Thank you both.
Thank you.